everyone, welcome back to my channel. I promise this is going to be the last video I make on this team, but I have been using it over the past few days. I've been going back and forth between Ultra League and Jungle Cup, and I've been trying a bunch of different teams, but I'll be honest, not much has worked for me. I keep going back to this team, and this one keeps working the most consistently for me. But in the coming rotation, I want to try some different teams, and we're getting Jungle Cup for another week, so I have an entire week to try out different Pokemon, and I really want to recommend something new to you guys that is going to work maybe even better than this team, who knows. But the reason I am making this video is because I have the battles recorded, and also I was asked by several different people to make an updated video on the team that I recommended a few days ago, and to see also if it is still working. So my answer is going to be, it is still working. I had some people message me and say they got to Legend with it, but for me in particular, I go a positive set and then I go a negative set, or like I'll do really well one day with the team and then the next day I will just absolutely get wrecked. And I know a lot of people in my comments have been telling me that they've been facing similar situations. So I wanted to say, I hear you. I completely understand. No team is going to be perfect. That's just how GBL is. Oh, and also, before I get into the battles, I want to say I made a huge mistake. I'm really embarrassed, but I thought that Shadow Dragonite in the mirror gets to a Dragon Claw. It doesn't. I thought that because in one of my games I did get to that Dragon Claw, and I think I only got there because my opponent lagged. So I started assuming that Shadow Dragonite can make it to the Dragon Claw, but in reality, someone pointed out this to me in my comments, that no Shadow Dragonite can live 12 Dragon Breaths. So the Shadow Dragonite lead matchup is going to be very dependent on IVs. Sometimes it's going to be a simultaneous KO, sometimes you'll be able to KO your opponent in 11 Dragon Breaths, or sometimes your opponent will KO you in 11 Dragon Breaths. So very IV dependent. For the Shadow Dragonite lead, you just need a Dragonite with better IVs. The one with better IVs will be able to survive that matchup. Alrighty, let's just get into the battles. I think I have some really nice ones for you guys today, and I've been collecting these from the past several days. So the most recent sets I'm going to show you are at the beginning of this video, and then the last set I'm going to show you is a little bit older. It is when I got to the 2900s, but that is going to be the set that I played in the highest elo I have been this season. Okay, so the game you're seeing on screen right now, the opponent led Whiscash, and then they swapped into a Tentacruel, and I was actually assuming that they would have a Toxapex in the back because I have been facing that team a lot. It is Whiscash lead with Tentacruel and Toxapex in the back, but in this situation it is going to be a Skarmory. I actually lost to that double poison team in the previous game that I showed in this video. Okay, so my opponent threw the Brave Bird from their Skarmory onto my Mantine, but I had a shield left and I was able to shield that. And then they're just going to swap into their Whiscash to clear the debuff, but I keep in mind that my opponent still has that Skarmory left in the back, so I farm up extra energy. That way I will be able to reach the Water Pulse before my opponent's Skarmory can get to a move. I swapped into Dragonite there to clear the debuff on my Mantine, just so that I can make sure that the Water Pulse would KO the Skarmory. Okay, moving on to the next game, it looks like we are going to be up against a Skarmory lead. The way I like to play this is I will bring in Vigoroth against the Skarmory, and I will throw the Rock Slide immediately, but in this case, my opponent actually goes ahead and shields the Rock Slide. And I actually didn't want to go shields down, so I went ahead and I no-shielded the Sky Attack, and then I was able to reach, they swap into a Swampert, and I'm able to reach 2 Body Slams on the Swampert. We're able to take both of my opponent's shields, and now I have a Dragonite with 2 shields. I also have a half-health Mantine. They went ahead and they threw Sludge Wave on our Mantine. Whatever, it's fine. I want to save both of my shields for my Dragonite, because I know Dragonite is absolutely going to destroy whatever my opponent is going to have. So we go for a superpower on that Skarmory, and then we're able to KO the Skarmory with the superpower, but my opponent is going to have a very bulky Pokemon in the back. Let's see if Mantine, without Ice Beam, will be able to take on this Altaria on its own. We're able to reach 3 aerial aces. We still have a shield, by the way, so my opponent isn't going to throw a move. And we're able to take the bulky Altaria out with our half-health Mantine going straight aerial ace. Moving on to the next match, we are going to be up against a Lantern. This is where we want to see it, and I'll just go straight for the Dragon Claws in this match. Now, I lagged a little bit, and I wasn't comfortable throwing the Dragon Claw because I was worried I would mess up and let my opponent sneak a move. So I held on to that energy, but my opponent swaps into a Ferrothorn, probably trying to catch a Dragon Claw, but I held on to my energy. I went for the superpower, and they shielded the superpower, and then I thought I caught a Power Whip on my Vigoroth, but my opponent throws a Mirror Shot. So we still have a very healthy Vigoroth. They're going to bring their Lantern in against our Vigoroth. We are going to be able to take it out with the Body Slams as well, and it looks like my opponent is going to have that Wigglytuff in the back. Keep in mind, I have a superpower saved on my Dragonite, so superpower is going to be hurting Wigglytuff a lot because of Wigglytuff's normal typing. So I expected my opponent to shield the first move because they will go for Icy Wind and debuff us. So I went ahead and I baited with the Aerial Ace, and then on the next move I went for that Water Pulse. My opponent no shielded it, and then I was still able to reach 2 Aerial Aces, one to get the Wigglytuff low, and then the second one got my opponent's final shield, and then I was able to swap in Dragonite and go immediately for that superpower and take the Fairy type out with our Dragon type. Alright, moving on to the next game. It is going to be a little bit tricky because we are up against a Stunfisk. We definitely don't want this to survive and see the Mantine in the back. So I'm just going to go straight for the Dragon Claws up against the Stunfisk, and my opponent is shielding the Dragon Claws. I go ahead and I double shield my Dragonites. Usually when my opponent is running Mudshot, I will no shield one of the discharges, but I think my opponent is going to be able to take us out with the discharge here or get really close to taking us out, but then I swap into my Vigoroth and my opponent stays in long enough to let me take their Stunfisk out. Thank goodness, otherwise it would have survived to see my Mantine. We definitely don't want that. My opponent is going to bring a Scrafty in against our Vigoroth, but I am able to reach 2 Body Slams, and with the counter damage, that's going to be enough to take the Scrafty out. Now, I've slowed the video down because something happens in this game, and I posted this on Twitter. I was really frustrated, but my opponent is going to have a Mantine in the back, and this is going to get very, very tricky. I might be able to win this if I pull off a catch on Dragonite. Keeping in mind, I have that Shadow Dragonite in the back. It has 1 HP, and I can use it as a third shield if I have to. Now, my opponent is going to be going straight Ice Beam, and of course, I'm just going to have to go for these Aerial Aces. Now, let's watch how this plays out, because it is going to get to a point where I'm going to realize, because we are going to CMP tie on the next move, that my opponent does win CMP. Unfortunately, because my Mantine has 0 attack, I lose CMP to most Mantine mirror matches. So you can see here, I lose CMP to the Mantine. This is good for me to know. That means I know that I can't CMP on the next Aerial Ace. And I know also that me and my opponent will reach the move at the same time. And I am expecting my opponent to anticipate the catch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 1 extra wing attack, go for a catch on my Dragonite, calling that my opponent was going to do 1 extra wing attack before throwing their move. And we're able to catch a move, but it is a Bubble Beam. I was expecting an Aerial Ace, but look what happens here. The game gives me 1 turn lag. I'm not able to throw the Aerial Ace. I played this out of my mind, and I was so devastated when that happened to me. We get a 3-1, which is still a positive set, but I was robbed of that 4-1. Also, if I got that 4-1, I would have gone back into the 2,800. So I was really frustrated here. It was kind of disappointing, I'll be honest. And also, I wasn't getting like really nice gameplay in the past few days, so I was like really excited when this set in particular, I got some really nice games in it, and then I just lost that game like that. I was disappointed, I'll be honest. Anyways, moving on to the next match, we are going to be up against a Quagsire, which is a little bit of a tricky lead. Your opponent will beat you only if they bait twice, so they have to go Aqua Tail twice, but it looks like my opponent is running Mud Bomb, and they also didn't bait on the second move. I went ahead and I double shielded my Dragonite, so I was going to be able to fully Dragon Breath their Quagsire down, but they go ahead and they swap into a Clodsire. I had so much energy built up on my Dragonite, so I unloaded all of that energy onto their Clodsire, got them into the red, and then I brought my Vigoroth in. I did reach a Body Slam against Clodsire, but my opponent went ahead and saved their Clodsire for some reason, so I don't know why they did that, but now they are going to have an Abomasnow in the back. With one shield left, I am going to be able to reach 2 aerial aces against the Abomasnow. The second one will take the Abomasnow out, and then I should be able to reach a Dragon Claw against the Quagsire, take the Quagsire out, and the Clodsire is going to be really low. All I had to do was Wing Attack or Dragon Breath it down. So GG's to our opponent. On to the next game, we are going to be up against that Talonflame, and I'm just going to go straight Dragon Claw against this Talonflame. They usually always shield the Dragon Claw, so we take a shield from them, and of course I am going to invest a shield into my Dragonite. They go for that Fly, and then they swap into a Quagsire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for a Dragon Claw, farm up as much energy, and actually I decide to stay in this and shield my Dragonite. I shield the Stone Edge, and then I just farm the Quagsire down because they let the Dragon Claw go. And now I have energy on my Dragonite, and they are going to bring in a Whimsicott. This is going to get very tricky. I immediately swap into my Vigoroth when I see that Whimsicott. Just going to go straight for that Body Slam, and hopefully they don't shield. They no shield it. They are in the yellow now. So now I'm hoping that my Mantine is going to be able to take this game for me. I bring it in against the Whimsicott. As soon as they see it, they bring in Talonflame. Okay, so they are 2 Incinerates away from another Fly, and I believe that my Mantine will get KO'd by the next one. So what I do is I throw the Aerial Ace, and then I bring in my Dragonite, and we CMP tie on the Dragon Claw with the Talonflame. I'm able to take the Talonflame out, and then I am also able to reach another Dragon Claw on the Whimsicott and take it out with our Dragonite. Now that was a little bit of a risky play because I gave my opponent a chance to potentially farm my Dragonite down with Whimsicott, but thankfully we are able to reach another Dragon Claw on Dragonite, and it is enough to take the Whimsicott out. Moving on to the next battle, we are going to see a Lantern on the lead. Now, depending on the mood I'm in, I might choose to double shield my Dragonite, or I might choose to let one of the Surfs go. I should still be able to reach 2 Dragon Claws on this Lantern, even if I let a Surf go. But I go ahead and I shield both of the Surfs because my opponent is still very healthy, and I wanted to get that Lantern a lot lower. So I Dragon Breath as much as I can, and then I go for a Dragon Claw, thinking I could reach another move on whatever my opponent is going to bring in next, but it is going to be an Abomasnow, and they immediately take our Dragonite out. Now, I have to make a decision if I want to bring in my Mantine or my Vigoroth. I go for the Mantine, and unfortunately my opponent is running that Icy Wind, so they were able to debuff our Mantine before I threw that Aerial Ace. It didn't do that much damage to the Abomasnow, but then I immediately swap into my Vigoroth. I'm calling that my opponent is going to have something else in the back that is going to be weak to Vigoroth. They do. They have their own Vigoroth. Now, all I have to do here is farm the Vigoroth down, and I should be able to outpace to the Aerial Ace against the Abomasnow, and I will be able to take this game, only because my opponent was running Icy Wind in place of Weather Ball. If they were running Weather Ball, they would have been able to reach that and take our Mantine out. Moving on to the next match, this is one of the situations where our Vigoroth save swap is not going to work out for us. We swap into Vigoroth into the Skarmory, and my opponent brings in a Decidueye, and Decidueye is absolutely going to destroy Vigoroth. Now, they let the Rock Slide go. I probably could have shielded Vigoroth to win that switch, but if I use shields in that matchup, unfortunately their Skarmory is going to destroy our entire team because Skarmory already is really good against the whole team. So yeah, it was a tricky situation. And also, they also called the Dragon Claw bait on my Dragonite. Instead of throwing Superpower, I went for Dragon Claw on the Skarmory because they had 2 shields left. They let it go, and in the end, they just had that Shadow Dragonite in the back, and I just top left. So GG's to our opponent. Unfortunately, you are going to lose some hardwall games. Moving on to the next battle, I always feel relieved whenever I swap in Vigoroth into a Skarmory and my opponent stays in because I really need to get this damage off on the Skarmory, but this time I thought I would call a Sky Attack and my opponent went Brave Bird, so unfortunately I let my Vigoroth go there, And then I bring in Dragonite because my opponent is debuffed, but of course they are going to swap out. They swap out into a Quagsire. I'm going to go ahead and shield whatever this is here. I don't think my opponent will be able to reach another move. Unfortunately, they still make it to that Aqua Tail, and yeah, we're just going to have to take that damage on Dragonite. Now, my opponent does have a Skarmory, which is in the yellow, so I think I could go for a Dragon Claw here, and the Dragon Claw might be enough to take the Skarmory out. They go ahead and they shield it. They still have a shield left now. And I bring in my Mantine, and I go ahead and I shield my Mantine against the Skarmory. They go for a Brave Bird. But unfortunately for me, they're going to have the little pancake that is going to destroy both of the Pokemon that I have left. All this little pancake has to do is go for 2 discharges on my Mantine, and they can even farm up enough energy to reach a discharge on my Dragonite before I can reach a move on Dragonite. So unfortunately, Stunfisk is going to destroy my team in this game. But despite that loss, we still got a 3-2 in that set, a positive set, and we were able to get back into the 2800s. Now, the battles I'm going to show you here are a lot higher in ELO. These are also older, so they're from a few days ago. And they were when I was in the really high 2800s and I made it into the 2900s. But I decided to include them because the battles were really nice. Up first, we are going to see a Vigoroth lead. I like to double shield my Dragonite up against this Vigoroth lead. I will go for a Dragon Claw against the Vigoroth, and then I'll go for a full farm down. But in this case, my opponent doesn't let me farm them down. They swap into a Talonflame. This is okay, I can bring Mantine into Talonflame, and then I just have to go for the Aerial Ace because I believe the Talonflame is an Aerial Ace range. So we're able to take the Talonflame out, and then I go for another Aerial Ace on the Vigoroth before they can get to a move, but they decide to invest their final shield on their Vigoroth, which is very interesting because my Dragonite is still alive and I can farm that Vigoroth down, but they don't let me. They swap into a Palisand. I am able to reach a Dragon Claw on my Dragonite, and then I swap into my Vigoroth, which should be able to deal with the Palisand now that it is in the red. That Dragon Claw did so much damage to it, and we are able to reach a Body Slam on the Palisand before it can reach another Scorching Sands. We're able to take the Palisand out, and then my opponent top lefts. GG's to our opponent. Moving on to the next battle, this is a really good one. We're going to be up against another Vigoroth lead. You can see why earlier this team was performing really well for me, and that's because a lot of people were running leads that were going to be really nice for Dragonite. So I'm just going to go straight for that Dragon Claw. We take a shield from our opponent. I'm going to invest my second shield and then go for a farm down, but my opponent is going to swap into a Clodsire, or no, not Clodsire. A Piloswine, that's what this thing is called, and I bring in my Vigoroth against it because I am expecting my opponent to potentially have a flyer in the back because they led something weak to counter and then they swapped in something weak to counter, but my opponent is not going to have a flyer in the back. They're going to have a Clodsire. This is the Clodsire. This is where it comes in. But now my opponent is going to do something really scary. They commit to a full farm down on the Vigoroth. At least we're able to get 2 Body Slams off on the Clodsire, but that's really bad for me because they can now reach 2 Stone Edges on our Mantine. And this is a good player, so I don't expect my opponent to fall for a catch. If I go for a catch on my Dragonite immediately when my opponent reaches that Stone Edge, which I do, but they are forced to throw a Stone Edge before they can farm up a lot of energy because I was going to reach that Dragon Claw on Dragonite, and Dragonite would have been able to take Clodsire out. Now, Dragonite was able to do enough Dragon Breath damage to the Clodsire to get it into Aerial Ace range, and because they went for a catch on a Vigoroth that was still in the yellow, I was able to undercharge the Aerial Ace. We're able to take the Vigoroth out in exactly 5 wing attacks and have an Aerial Ace ready for the Clodsire and take the Clodsire out. GG's to our opponent. That was a really good game. Now moving on to the next match, this was back when I was still safe swapping Mantine into Steelix leads, but I learned really quickly that the Steelix is just going to debuff you and then swap out into something else, and that something else is going to be able to beat the Mantine. In this case, they swap into their own Mantine, and of course we're going to get destroyed by it because of that debuff from Steelix. What I've started doing is I've started swapping into my Vigoroth. I found that it was just a nicer safe swap up against the Steelix, and also a lot of people are not going to run Steelix lead with like a complete hard counter for Vigoroth in the back like Palossand. But in that match, my opponent had an Altaria in the back, and then I just top left because there was nothing I was going to be able to do. Moving on to the next battle, we are going to see a Whimsicott on the lead. Oh no, I swap immediately into my Vigoroth, and I go immediately for that Body Slam because I know I can reach it before my opponent can make it to a Grass Knot. My opponent only builds up to a Grass Knot, so I go ahead and no-shield it, and then they bring in their own Vigoroth. Okay, I go for a Body Slam, they let it go, that's fine, but they farm our Vigoroth down, and now I am going to bring Dragonite in, but I am going to have to shield whatever my opponent is going to throw. No, I no-shield the Body Slam. I'm actually counting on my Mantine to win this for me. I'm really hoping that Mantine is going to be able to take this game for me, because also I was able to get the Whimsicott into the yellow. So my opponent has a Talonflame in the back. I got really lucky here that my opponent had the Talonflame in the back. They attempted to catch a Water Pulse on their Whimsicott, but I kept farming and I was able to throw an Aerial Ace on Whimsicott, take it out. And I also called their first move. It was a Flame Charge. I am going to have to start shielding their moves, however. But at this point, I think I can go for a full farm down on the Talonflame instead of throwing the Aerial Ace. Actually, I build up to 2 Aerial Aces, but I think I am going to commit to that farm down and take the Talonflame out. GG's to our opponent. Again, that was complete luck because my opponent could have had something a lot worse from Mantine in the back. I was calling a flyer. I was, worst case scenario, I was thinking it would be a Skarmory. And then the other thing I thought it might be was a Mantine, which in that case, we both had 2 shields and they had a Whimsicott, so I might have lost that, but I got really lucky that it was a Talonflame. Moving on to the next battle, again, I am going to play this in the same stupid way that I played it in the last game where I faced a Steelix lead. Of course, my opponent is going to stay in and debuff us with the Psychic Fangs, and then they swap into their own Mantine. You guys know the definition of stupid? It's when you repeat something and you keep getting the same results, but you repeat something and you expect different results. That's the definition of stupid. And clearly here, I was not trying to change my strategy, but eventually I did recognize that, oh, maybe I can swap into Vigoroth, because even if I swap into Vigoroth, if my opponent brought in a flyer, I can threaten with the Rock Slides. But in this game, we are going to get destroyed because even if I had brought in the Vigoroth against the Steelix, my opponent has a Buzzwole in the back, which I am definitely not expecting, but the Buzzwole is absolutely going to destroy our Vigoroth. They did let us get the 2 Body Slams off, but, you know, they have a full health Steelix in the back. What's my Dragonite gonna do against it? Yeah, so we are going to take that loss, but that was a positive set. Again, this was back when I was still climbing and doing really well with the team, and I was able to reach 2906. After that, I kind of got bored and I started using a lot of different stuff, and I dropped quite a bit, but my goal for next week is to try a few different Jungle Club teams and try to discover something that is going to be consistent, but also maybe a little more interesting. I don't know if it's going to be interesting. I can't promise it's going to be interesting, but yeah, I do want to try different teams. That brings us to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching if you've made it this far. And if you guys like my content, please consider subscribing. Maybe leave a like. It helps me out so much. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!